All right, thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to play to these guys over here, right? So one of the skills I have in life is talking my way into jobs that I'm largely unqualified for. One of which was writing for children's television. I didn't have children, and I didn't have a television. But I had a pretty good run in New York for a while, until a show I was developing for the network crashed and burned when a focus group of 4-year-olds voted thumbs down on the project. Apparently the idea of an intellectual roundtable for puppets was ahead of its time. So I was 45, broke, burned out on kids' TV, and burned out on New York. And I had to pull another trick out of my bag. Somehow, I managed to, through a series of agonizing long-distance phone interviews, talk my way into a job as a public affairs officer on a wildlife refuge in California. It sounded to me like the kind of job Kerouac would have taken, right? And then probably passed out drunk by the campfire and burned the place down. I personally was never into wildlife that much. Wildlife in New York were rats, right? The size of babies. Even as a kid, I really was not much of a nature person. When I was 9, my parents enrolled me in the Cub Scouts, and I was horrified to discover on a camping trip upstate that not only did we have to go to the bathroom in a hole in the ground, but we had to dig it ourselves. Right? It was like the killing fields. So my scouting career ended on a field trip to a wastewater treatment plant when I fell in one of the holding pools, and our den mother had to rescue me. I also didn't know a whole lot about wildlife refuges. Fun fact, they were created in the early 20th century when fishermen and hunters like Teddy Roosevelt looked at all the development going on in the country and realized that if these sensitive, fragile wildlife habitats were not protected and preserved, there wouldn't be anything left to kill. So this particular refuge was known for its birds. And of all the wildlife that I didn't care about, birds right up at the top of the list. If every bird on the planet had disappeared overnight, I wouldn't have noticed for months. One day I would just be like, weren't there these things like flapping around up there, making noise? But I was excited about getting a new start in a different part of the country. So I loaded up my stuff, moved out of my Greenwich Village apartment, and drove across country, landing about a week or so later in transitional housing in the refuge, which was a trailer on a gravel pit behind a row of porta potties. It was a bit of an adjustment. One thing they neglected to mention was that we had to wear uniforms, which is a kind of brown and beige mudslide ensemble, cut as if they were made by blind, thumbless prisoners. 40% polyester, I would say about 60% cartilage, from what I could tell, because the pants just stood up on their own. I didn't really have a very clear idea of what my job was supposed to be, and neither did they. They had never had a public affairs officer before. I think they were looking at me to take the lead on that. So part of it, I decided, was making up names for birds on tours of the refuge. And I would be leading some group out, you know, and someone would point in the distance at some bird and they would say, "What is that?" And I would be like, "That is a brown smudge, I believe. California brown smudge. And this one making that piercing noise, that's a pointless squawk, is what that is." Completely pointless if you listen closely. I was also hoping that this change of scene would inject some new energy into my love life. But it turns out that most of the women who work on a wildlife refuge are the kind that are into big trucks, overalls, and woodworking. One of them who did not fit that bill was Kimmy, who was a very slender, almost disturbingly healthy-looking woman working in the environmental education department. And I developed a sudden interest in environmental education. And we pretty soon were talking together every day quite a bit about all kinds of things. And with no other obvious prospects within miles, I really started to fall for her. One day we're talking about college, and I was shocked to find out she was only 28. But the obvious age difference didn't seem to bother her. You know, she seemed to be really into me. She was also really into wildlife. And guess what? So was I. She's like, really? What kind? And I'm like, birds? She's like, wow, if you're into birds, we should go canoeing on Coyote Slough. Amazing birds. And I'm like, canoeing on Coyote Slough? That sounds unbelievable. She's like, great. Why don't you meet me Sunday at the boat launch at 6? And I'm like, isn't it going to get dark soon after 6? Yeah, no, 6 in the morning, right? On a Sunday, right? Yeah. I had seen 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday before, but usually at the end of an adventure, right? So later that day at lunch, a coworker tells me about a woman who drowned on Coyote Slough. Yeah, apparently she got out of her canoe at low tide, got stuck in a mud flat. She was all alone. Her cell phone had no reception. And when the water came back in, it swallowed her up. So Sunday morning, 6 o'clock, I'm meeting Kimby down at the boat launch, and as soon as I arrive, I realize how inappropriately dressed I am. Because she's got like a floppy sun hat, nylon shorts, and like aqua socks. And I'm in like a polo shirt, white slacks, and like deck shoes. I look like I'm going for cocktails on somebody's schooner, you know? And I almost fall in the water getting in the boat, and she yanks me in. And then we set out into the slough. And she tells me, you know, paddle faster because the tide will be going out soon and we don't want to get stuck out there. Yeah. I sneak a peek at my cell phone, you know? No reception. So after about 30 minutes of paddling out there and the sun beating down on me, I'm completely nauseous. And I'm convinced I have sunstroke. And she's like, you know, did you see that black neck stilt? You know, and I'm coughing up pieces of my lung. So we get out pretty deep into the marsh after a while, and then at some point, we get stuck on a mud flat. And I immediately panic. There's nobody else around. And then I see somebody on the horizon, and I yell for help. And Kimmy gives me this look like, and then she just calmly pushes us off the mud flat out into the water. So after about 2 or 3 hours out there, it could have been days for all I know, we finally head back to the boat launch. And as we get close to it, I decide I'm sweating, I'm sunburned, you know, I'm gasping for air. She looks like a model in a deodorant commercial. It's just fresh. So as we get close to the boat launch, I decide to jump out of the boat and, you know, impress her by getting up there and pulling it in. But I mistime my jump, and I fall a little short. And this tiny old woman who's tying up a boat on the ramp leans out and grabs me, pulls me up. Yeah, she said it looked like I was trying to escape. So we get the boat put away, and we go out for breakfast at a diner. Now I'm back in my native habitat, right? And she asks me what I thought about the trip, and I was like, great, really invigorating. And she's like, yeah, I really want to take my partner out there. And I'm like, you know, is she in some kind of small business? I said, your partner in what? She goes, my boyfriend. And what little air is still in my lungs just goes whoop, right out. Yeah, he's a park ranger in Colorado. They've been going out since college. They get together a few days a month. I'm picturing some sporty rock climber named Crag or Boulder. So I think off of my expression, maybe, she makes a point of complimenting my canoeing. And she says, you move pretty well for your age. She says, yeah, my dad has a hard time too these days. Just getting in and out of the car. Yeah. She says, I'm going out next week on bobcat slough. Great chance to see marbled godwits. And she says it's a bit more of a challenge because the currents can really pull you along, you know. She goes, but, you know, if you think you're up to it, you're welcome to come. And, you know, I take this as a challenge. I'm like, oh, I'm up to it. I'm up to it. You know, don't want to miss those godwits. She says, great, and takes off to meet her partner. And I go in the bathroom and dry heave for a few minutes. And when I get back to my car, I find that in what I take as an ironic gesture, birds have crapped all over it. Thank you.